These are the worst dashcam deaths ever caught on camera. Philando, Castile, Falcon Heights, Minnesota. Imagine you're driving through a quiet Minnesota suburb on a warm July evening. Your girlfriend's in the passenger seat. Her 4-year-old kid is in the back. All of a sudden, police lights flash behind you. You've been pulled over plenty of times before, so you know the drill. Stay calm, hands visible, cooperate. This time, none of that is going to matter. The driver in that car was 32-year-old Philando Castile, a cafeteria supervisor at a Montessori school in St. Paul. He was just trying to get home on the evening of July 6, 2016.
But Officer Jeronimo Yanez of the St. Anthony Police Department had other plans.
The cop pulled him over in Falcon Heights, officially for a broken taillight. But there was a second reason, one that didn't come out until later. Just before this stop, Yanez had radioed another officer, saying the driver matched the description of a suspect from a recent armed robbery. You'd expect something specific: height, build, clothing, maybe a distinguishing feature worth writing down. What Yanez actually said was that the driver had a wide-set nose. Somewhere, a detective school is asking for its diploma back. But that was enough for Yanez, and he rode out with Officer Joseph Ghaisar as backup. Ghaisar took the passenger side while Yanez walked up to Castile's window. Yanez asked for a license and insurance. Castile cooperates and hands over his insurance card. Then, calmly, he tells Yanez exactly what Minnesota law requires a licensed gun owner to say during a traffic stop.
Registration.
I have to tell you, I do have a firearm on me.
Don't reach for it then. Don't pull it out.
What happened next took about 7 seconds. The dashcam doesn't show inside the car, just Yanez at the window. So whether Castile was reaching for his wallet, his license, or his gun came down to testimony alone. Diamond Reynolds, his girlfriend in the passenger seat, said he was going for his ID. Officer Ghaisar, standing on the other side of the car, said he never saw a gun and never felt threatened. Not until Yanez started shooting. 2 people within arm's reach of Castile saw nothing dangerous. The one person who did was already pulling the trigger. Seconds after shooting, Reynolds pulled out her phone and went live on Facebook. Millions of people watched in real time as she sat next to her bleeding boyfriend, with Yanez still pointing his weapon into the car, screaming at her not to move. Her 4-year-old daughter was in the back seat the entire time. The dashcam footage wasn't released to the public until June 20, 2017, almost a year after the shooting. By then, Yanez had already been tried for second-degree manslaughter and 2 counts of reckless discharge of a firearm. The jury acquitted him on all 3 counts, but he was fired from the St. Anthony Police Department shortly after. Bishar Hassan, Anchorage, Alaska. Imagine you're walking down a street in Alaska on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. 3 police cars pull up in front of you all at once. And before you've even processed what's happening, you're already on the ground. To understand how it got there, you have to go back to earlier that afternoon. A man had walked out of a Walmart in Anchorage carrying a BB gun he just bought, which is basically a toy that shoots small plastic pellets. The problem was, this particular one was a replica modeled after a 9mm handgun, realistic enough that if you saw it from across a parking lot, you wouldn't know the difference. And apparently, somebody at the Walmart store didn't know the difference either. The person called 911 and reported a black man walking around with what looked like a handgun and was possibly intoxicated. Not exactly a description that narrows things down, but dispatchers ran with it anyway. That man was 31-year-old Bishar Ali Hassan. The calls kept stacking up after that. Multiple people reported seeing someone matching Hassan's description boarding a people mover bus near Fireweed Lane, then getting off at 16th Avenue and A Street. By the time dispatchers had his location pinned, 3 APD cruisers were already rolling, and all 3 pulled up on him at the same time. It was still broad daylight, and the dashcam on one of the cruisers was running. By the time Hassan hit the ground, the officers had fired roughly 20 shots. The footage keeps rolling. He's still moving, lying on the pavement, and the officers are yelling at him to roll onto his stomach. He couldn't, and for about 2 minutes, nobody came over. He was eventually transported to the hospital, where he died from his wounds. In July 2019, the Alaska Office of Special Prosecutions cleared all 3 officers, ruling that they'd acted in self-defense. The dashcam footage sat in police custody for nearly 3 years after that. Hassan's family didn't see it until they filed a $20 million wrongful death lawsuit against the city of Anchorage in April 2021. Their attorney got hold of it and released it to NBC News in February 2022. The lawsuit is still pending. Dalip Kumar, New Jersey Turnpike. Imagine driving up the New Jersey Turnpike on a Wednesday afternoon. Then you spot a cargo van ahead with mattresses strapped to the roof. And something about the way they're sitting doesn't look right. But before you can finish that thought, they come loose, tumbling across the highway. And a tanker, loaded with thousands of gallons of fuel, is 2 seconds behind. Those 2 seconds belong to 40-year-old trucker Dalip Kumar. On October 7, 2015, he was hauling a full load of fuel up the northbound lanes of the Turnpike near Kearney just after 3 in the afternoon. The van ahead of him belonged to a 26-year-old named Adam Abuhamud, who had loaded mattresses onto his roof without bothering to secure them properly. When the mattresses came loose and hit the road, Kumar was right behind the van. But a fully loaded tanker doesn't stop the way a sedan does. You can't just hit the brakes and hope for the best. By the time Kumar saw what was happening, he was already too close. He had about 2 seconds to decide. Plow straight into the van and the mattresses and risk a fireball in the middle of 3 lanes of moving traffic, or cut hard to the right and take himself off the road entirely. Kumar went right. A Michigan trucker named Kevin Hauer was driving right behind Kumar when it happened, and his dashcam caught the whole thing. You can see the tanker cut sharply across all 3 lanes, from the left all the way to the right shoulder. It clips the guardrail, tips over, and drops off the side of the road. The moment it lands, the whole thing goes up in flames, and Kumar gets trapped inside. According to reports, Hauer pulled over and ran toward the wreck to try and help, but the heat pushed him back before he could get anywhere close. A Honda CR-V was also caught up in the crash, but its driver walked away without a scratch. Kumar was the only fatality. He was pronounced dead at the scene. As for Abuhamud, he was fined for improper cargo and sent on his way. Jashanpreet Singh. Imagine you're sitting in traffic on the I-10 freeway in Ontario, California on a Tuesday afternoon. Westbound lanes have slowed to a crawl near the Milliken Avenue off-ramp, and you're just waiting for the cars ahead to start moving. What you can't see is a fully loaded semi-truck coming up behind the line at full speed, and the driver isn't slowing down. Behind the wheel of that truck was 21-year-old Jashanpreet Singh, hauling a red Freightliner tractor trailer westbound on the I-10 on October 21, 2025. Now, when you're driving a vehicle that weighs tens of thousands of pounds, the general expectation, a pretty reasonable one, is that you slow down when traffic stops. But Singh had other ideas. He noticed the traffic up ahead and plowed straight into the back of the line at highway speed. It set off a chain reaction crash that swallowed 8 vehicles, including 4 other commercial trucks, and sent fire spilling across 3 lanes of the freeway. 3 people died that afternoon. 2 of them were a married couple, Clarence and Lisa Nelson. Clarence had spent years as an assistant basketball coach at Pomona High School, and the 2 of them were just riding together that afternoon when Singh's truck reached them. 4 other people were injured, including a mechanic who wasn't even on the road. He'd been on the side of the freeway changing a tire when the wreckage spilled off the freeway and found him anyway. The dashcam footage actually came from Singh's own truck. The camera is mounted inside his cab, pointing forward, so you see exactly what he saw. A wall of stopped cars getting closer and closer, and at no point does the truck slow down. It hits a white SUV first, then keeps going, smashing through vehicle after vehicle before flames start erupting from under the cab. Then the whole thing veers off to the right. Officers from the California Highway Patrol who arrived at the scene said it looked like an explosion had gone off, with car parts scattered across every lane. One of them, Officer Rodrigo Jimenez, later told reporters that the whole thing could have been avoided if somebody had been paying attention sober. That somebody was Jashanpreet Singh, and he was far from sober. Investigators found that he was driving under the influence of drugs when the crash happened. He was arrested right there at the scene and hit with 3 counts of gross vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated, plus DUI causing injury. He pleaded not guilty and is currently being held without bail. Kyle Dinkheller, you're a deputy sheriff nearing the end of your shift on a Monday evening in rural Georgia. Your radar clocks a pickup doing 98 miles per hour on the interstate. So you think about putting in one more case, not knowing this would be your last. That's exactly where 22-year-old Deputy Kyle Dinkheller found himself on the evening of January 12, 1998. He had a 2-year-old daughter at home and a wife who was about to tell him she was pregnant. After spending nearly 3 years with Lawrence County Sheriff's Office, he'd just been promoted to an elite interstate unit that hunted drug runners running along I-16. Now, the man he pulled over that evening was not your average speedster. He was Andrew Brannon, a 49-year-old Vietnam War veteran who'd served 2 tours as an artillery officer with the 23rd Infantry Division. After the stop, Dinkheller asked him to step back toward the cruiser with his hands visible. Standard stuff. Instead, Brannon responded by shoving both hands deeper into his pockets and screaming at the deputy to shoot him. Not exactly the direction most traffic stops go. Dinkheller radioed for backup immediately, but his nearest partner was 15 miles out. So for the next several minutes, it was just the 2 of them on a quiet rural stretch near Dudley, Georgia, and Dinkheller's dashcam was recording everything. When Brannon noticed Dinkheller calling for help, he rushed at him. Dinkheller pulled out his baton, and Brannon backed off. But as it turned out, Brannon wasn't retreating. Instead, he walked back to his truck, reached under his seat, and came back with an M1 carbine. Backup was still 10 minutes out, and things were moving fast. Dinkheller spent the next 40 seconds giving every command in the book, but Brannon ignored all of them. He then crouched by his driver's side door and opened fire. Dinkheller fired back, but missed. Some analysts believed it was a warning shot, which tells you everything about the kind of person he was, staring down a rifle and still trying not to kill the guy. Brannon didn't extend the same courtesy. He advanced on the cruiser, firing round after round, hitting Dinkheller in the arms, legs, and torso. Dinkheller managed 1 shot to Brannon's stomach, but it barely slowed him down. By the end, Dinkheller had been shot 9 times. Brannon then walked up, took careful aim, and fired a final round into his right eye. He then got back in his truck and drove off. Police found him the next morning, hiding in the woods, still in Lawrence County, and even then, his only words were, "They can hang me." Not a trace of remorse. At trial, his defense argued PTSD, and for the most part, his record backed it up. 2 combat tours and declared 100% disabled by the Department of Veterans Affairs for depression and bipolar disorder. His psychologist testified that the encounter with Dinkheller had likely triggered a flashback and that Brannon had been off his medication for 5 days. But the jury watched the dashcam footage, and whatever sympathy they had didn't survive what they saw. They convicted him of murder in a premeditated, torturous, and cruel manner, and sentenced him to death. Brannon was executed on January 13, 2015. Darrell Lunsford. Imagine you're a constable on patrol in rural East Texas. It's just after 1 a.m. on a Wednesday, and a weird car is rolling through your tiny town. Something about it doesn't sit right, so you pull it over and come face to face with 3 men on the run. Darrell Lunsford had made this same walk hundreds of times before. 8 years as a constable for Precinct 3 in Nacogdoches County. 8 years of late-night stops on Highway 59, and not a single one had gone sideways on him. He was 47, married with 2 kids, and ran an auto repair shop on the side. Inside the car he stopped that morning were brothers Valdemar and Rinaldo Villarreal, along with their associate, Jesus Cortez Zambrano. 3 guys on a run from Houston to Chicago with 31 pounds of marijuana packed in the trunk. But Lunsford didn't know any of that yet. He questioned Rinaldo, who was driving, and asked for his license. There was no license on him, and said he'd left it somewhere and claimed he was just helping his brother drive. Nothing about that story added up, so Lunsford asked to check the trunk. The moment Rinaldo popped it open, the smell of marijuana hit immediately. And this is where it should have ended. Call for backup, wait for another unit, secure the scene. But before Lunsford could do any of that, Valdemar got out of the car despite being told to stay put. Within seconds, he grabbed Lunsford by the legs while Rinaldo grabbed him from behind. Zambrano got out to join them. The 3 of them pinned Lunsford face down on the ground and just went to work on him. They stabbed him multiple times, grabbed his own handgun off him, and Valdemar put a single round in his neck. It severed his spinal cord and killed him right there on the side of the road. Then they dragged his body into a nearby ditch, got back into their car, and took off. The whole thing played out in minutes, and Lunsford's dashcam had recorded every second of it. What they didn't realize was that a sheriff's deputy named Don Welch had driven past Lunsford's stop just minutes earlier. So when that same car he saw came speeding past him moments later, Welch knew something was wrong. He turned around, drove back, and found Lunsford's body. Chief Deputy Thomas Staniland showed up shortly after, and he's the one who noticed the dashcam was still running. He rewound the tape, hit play, and watched 3 men murder his colleague in real time. By morning, police had clear footage of every single one of their faces, and these guys had no idea. The three of them ditched their car less than a mile from where Lunsford pulled them over and ran into the woods, still carrying 31 pounds of marijuana with them. Seemed like a solid escape plan, but Ronaldo didn't even make it a full day before a highway patrolman spotted him. Baldemar made it 2 more days before they found him. Zambrano managed a whole week, which honestly might be the most impressive thing any of them did. All 3 were convicted. Baldemar, who pulled the trigger, got life without parole. Ronaldo got 40 years. Zambrano pleaded guilty and got 30. Bijan Ghaisar. Imagine you're driving home on a Friday evening in Northern Virginia. You're on the parkway, minding your own business, when a car behind you crashes into the back of yours. For whatever reason, instead of stopping, you keep driving. And what started as a small car accident is now a police chase. That's how the last night of Bijan Ghaisar's life began, with a traffic incident he didn't cause. Ghaisar was a 25-year-old accountant working at his father's firm in McLean, Virginia. No criminal record, no history of violence, just a guy trying to get to his parents' house for dinner. On the evening of November 17, 2017, an Uber driver crashed into the back of his Jeep on the George Washington Memorial Parkway. The damage was minor. Nobody was hurt, and Ghaisar drove off without stopping. But turns out driving off from a minor accident like that is a misdemeanor in Virginia. It's not the kind of thing that gets you killed, or at least it shouldn't be. But U.S. Park police officers Lucas Vineyard and Alejandro Amaya treated it like it was. 2 officers went after Ghaisar on the parkway, with a Fairfax County cruiser following behind as backup. The park police didn't have dash cams or body cameras at the time, so the only reason any of this exists on video is because that Fairfax County car had one running, and the dash cam captured everything that happened next. Ghaisar was stopped 3 times during the pursuit. The first 2 times, the officers got out of their vehicle, approached his Jeep with their guns drawn, and Ghaisar slowly pulled away. Not at high speed, not aggressively. He just drove off. At no point in the footage did his vehicle appear to threaten either officer. The third time, the officers parked their SUV in front of his Jeep to block him in. They got out, guns drawn again, and approached. At this point, you'd think Ghaisar had run out of options. And technically, he had. But then his Jeep started to inch forward again. And that's when the officers opened fire. 10 shots, fired in 3 separate bursts, into the vehicle. 4 of them hit Ghaisar in the head. He spent 10 days in a coma before dying on November 27. When a doctor arrived to check him for organ donation, the officers denied access, declaring the brain-dead 25-year-old under arrest and his body evidence. The man hadn't moved in 10 days, but apparently the flight risk was real, and the accountability that came after wasn't much better. The Justice Department took a look at the case and passed. Fairfax County prosecutors managed to get manslaughter indictments in 2020. But a federal judge threw them out, ruling that the officers had immunity. In 2023, the government settled a wrongful death lawsuit with the Ghaisar family for $5 million, and the 2 officers involved were never convicted of anything. Leonard Cure. It's a Monday morning on Interstate 95 in southern Georgia, and a pickup truck blows past traffic doing over 100 miles per hour. A few seconds later, a sheriff's cruiser rushes after it with lights flashing. It started as a routine speeding stop, but a few minutes later, there's a gunshot from the shoulder of the road up ahead. The man behind the wheel of that truck was Leonard Cure, and to understand why a routine traffic stop ended with him dead on the side of a highway, you have to go back about 20 years. In 2003, Cure was convicted of robbing a Walgreens store in Dania Beach, Florida, and sentenced to life in prison. The problem was, he didn't do it. An ATM receipt proved he was miles away when the robbery happened, and the descriptions of the suspect given by the 2 store employees didn't even match each other. But none of that mattered at trial. It took the Innocence Project of Florida and a newly formed conviction review unit to finally get his case reopened. In April 2020, after 16 years behind bars, Cure was exonerated and walked free. The state eventually paid him $817,000 in compensation, which sounds like a lot until you break down what 16 years of someone's life is actually worth. Now, fast forward to October 16, 2023. Cure was driving his pickup truck north on I-95 through Camden County, Georgia. He was heading back to the home he'd recently bought outside Atlanta after visiting his mother in South Florida. Then Staff Sergeant Buck Aldridge clocked him doing over 100 miles per hour and pulled him over. Aldridge came out of his cruiser already shouting, demanding the Cure get out of the truck. Cure got out, walked to the back of the vehicle, and put his hands on the tailgate. Calm, cooperative, doing everything right. But when Aldridge told him to put his hands behind his back, that he was going to jail, something broke. After a lot of back and forth, Aldridge hit him with a taser. Cure spun around trying to rip the wires off. And just like that, the two of them got into a full-on struggle on the shoulder of a highway in broad daylight. At some point during the fight, Cure got a hand around Aldridge's throat, and that was all Aldridge needed. He drew his gun and fired, and Cure died right there on the shoulder of Interstate 95, 3 years after being told he was a free man. The district attorney eventually got around to reviewing the footage and had a pretty straightforward conclusion. The use of deadly force was objectively reasonable. No charges, no consequences, case closed. Cure's family then filed a $16 million lawsuit, and as of now, it's still working its way through the courts. Timothy Randall. Imagine you're driving down a country road in East Texas just after midnight. Then police lights flash behind you. You pull over and step out when the officer tells you to. You don't have a weapon. You keep your hands up. But somehow the officer still wasn't satisfied. Right before those lights came on, 29-year-old Timothy Randall had been on the phone with his mother. He was calling to let her know he was heading to his cousin's place after a night out, and that he'd be a little late, just so she wouldn't worry. He hung up when Sergeant Shane Iverson of the Rusk County Sheriff's Office pulled him over on that country road, allegedly for running a stop sign. Randall said he didn't run any stop sign, but Iverson ordered him out of the car anyway. As Randall stepped out, he put his wallet in his back pocket and adjusted his waistband, and the small movement is apparently what set the whole thing in motion. Iverson started digging through the front of Randall's pants, and then told him to put his hands behind his back. Randall kept his arms up, and told the officer he didn't have anything on him. The kind of thing you'd say because you think being cooperative and honest will keep you safe. In this case, though, it didn't. Then Iverson told Randall he was under arrest, but refused to say what he was being arrested for. Randall asked twice, and both times he got thrown to the ground instead of an answer. The shot tore through his ribs, lungs, and heart. Randall only managed a few more steps before collapsing face down on the road. Meanwhile, Iverson was never charged. A grand jury looked at the case 2 months later, watched a man get shot on the side of a road for adjusting his waistband, and decided there was nothing to indict. Iverson quietly retired from the department shortly after, and then, just to round things off nicely, went to court to make sure nobody ever saw the dashcam footage. And for nearly 2 years, it worked. Randall's mother had no idea what actually happened to her son on that road. She found out the same way most people find out things the government doesn't want them to know. She sued. A federal lawsuit forced Iverson's lawyers to hand over the footage, and once the magistrate saw it, the conclusion was pretty straightforward. Iverson's qualified immunity as a law enforcement officer was denied, and the case is heading to trial in 2026. Laquan McDonald. Imagine you're walking down a street on the southwest side of Chicago on an October night in 2014. Cop cars are on scene, and there's a teenager in the middle of the road holding a small knife. All of a sudden, another cop car arrives, and the whole thing changes in about 6 seconds. The teenager was Laquan McDonald, and he was 17 years old. Earlier that night, somebody had called 911 about a person breaking into cars in the Archer Heights neighborhood. By the time the police got there, McDonald was walking down the middle of the street with the 3-inch folding knife. Not exactly the kind of weapon that requires 8 squad cars and a firing squad. He popped the tire of a squad car and scratched its windshield. But by the time most of the officers were on scene, he was just walking, moving away from all of them. 7 officers were already there, and not one had fired a shot. They were keeping their distance, managing the situation, waiting him out. Then Officer Jason Van Dyke pulled up. Van Dyke was a 13-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department with at least 18 complaints already on his record. He stepped out of his car, and within 6 seconds, he opened fire. He fired a total of 16 rounds into McDonald. The kid went down after the first shot, and Van Dyke just kept pulling the trigger. The dash cam shows puffs of debris rising off the pavement as bullets kept hitting his body while he lay on the ground. What happened after the shooting is where this gets even worse. Police reports from multiple officers at the scene backed Van Dyke's story. They said McDonald had lunged at Van Dyke, and he was advancing in a threatening manner. But the dashcam showed the exact opposite. He was walking away, So either every one of those officers watched a different shooting, or they all agreed to lie about the same one. And the evidence tampering didn't stop at the paperwork. The audio equipment in Van Dyke's patrol car had been intentionally damaged, according to police technicians. Another car had its microphones stuffed in the glove compartment with the batteries put in backwards. On top of all that, a Burger King near the scene had security cameras that might have captured the whole thing. But after officers visited the restaurant that night, 86 minutes of footage just vanished, and nobody could explain where it went. The city sat on the dashcam video for over a year, and during that time, they quietly settled with McDonald's family for $5 million. Before the family had even filed a lawsuit, it took a freelance journalist suing the police department and a judge ordering the video released for the public to finally see what happened. That was 13 months after the shooting. As soon as the video went public, Van Dyke was charged with first-degree murder. In October 2018, a jury found him guilty of second-degree murder and 16 counts of aggravated battery, one for each bullet. He got 6 years and 9 months, but only served around 3. 3 other officers were charged with conspiracy for allegedly helping cover up what happened, but all 3 were acquitted.
That's the end of today's iceberg. And apologies again for the voice quality. I'm still battling a cold. That's all for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.